It's Wednesday morning, and this is Chuck Dixon back to answer your questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Hey, if you have a question for me, you your best option is to email your question to me at brunobookstore@gmail.com. That's brunobookstore@gmail.com. And it's the most direct way to reach me. Of course, you can post a question right underneath this video, or you can contact me on Facebook, but the surest way to get a hold of me is at that email address, brunobookstore@gmail.com. Let's go to the first question. Kev K. Mann, how would you feel about Dave Bautista playing Bane? Well, I'd feel pretty good about it since he seems really eager to play the character. And he is a Hispanic gentleman, an hombre, and seems to be a real smart guy. So he'd be able to play that aspect of Bane. And of course, obviously, he's got the physicality to play, my favorite Batman villain. So, yeah, I'd feel pretty good about it. And because he's so eager to do it. But you kind of have to caution because Facebook is full of postings about this person would love to play that character, and this person would love to play that character, or this person would love to direct a movie about this. Well, sort of wishful thinking doesn't mean it's going to happen. I think Bautista is a perfect casting choice, but it's not up to me, and it's not up to him. It's up to a bunch of agents, and because they seem to run Hollywood these days. But yeah, maybe someday it'll happen. I'd like to see that. Graham Nolan. Why is Graham Nolan your favorite artist? Asking for a friend. Is your friend's name Graham Nolan? Yeah, why wouldn't Graham Nolan be my favorite artist? Graham has been a long time uh, collaborator and friend, and we've done an awful lot of comics together at a lot of different companies. And one of the things I like about Graham is he's an all-rounder. He's a comic book all-rounder. He's a cartoonist in the classic sense of the great adventure strips that used to populate newspapers back in the golden age of the comic strip. And like so many of those great adventure strip artists, he's a cartoonist. He's at the heart, he's a cartoonist. And cartooning gets a bad rap for being too exaggerated or broad. But that's not what a cartoonist is. A cartoonist is an artist, and this goes back to the root definitions of cartoonists that go back to the Renaissance. A cartoonist is an artist who can simplify reality, um, who can just get it down to the basics. A cartoonist is someone who can really draw, and not only draw, but they draw so well they can play with proportion and reality and everything else, and it all still works. It's an exaggerated reality. And Graham is, I mean, look at this action. He's terrific at it. I mean, there's kinetic movement here. And everything else is in the right place, too. The placement of blacks, the panel composition. I mean, Graham's just got it all. And of course, Graham and I, we created Bane together. And he was, we were I had been on the Batman books for a while. He was just starting out, and they assigned me to create Bane, and I knew Graham was going to be the artist on it, so I brought Graham in early. I mean, as soon as I got home from the meeting with the bat editors, I got Graham on the phone. I said, we got to start thinking about what this guy's going to look like. This was even before he had a name, and Graham is the one who suggested the luchador look, and also suggested that he be hairy, and kind of have a skin problem because he's addicted to a super steroid, a human growth hormone. God knows what's in Venom, the concoction that powers Bane, and because because Graham was such an enormous Batman fan, not even just a Batman fan, but Graham is a Batman scholar. And, his contribution to this character was invaluable because both of us realized the golden opportunity we were being presented with, which was we were going to get to create a Batman villain that if we played our cards right and we did our homework and we sweated it and got all the details right, that this was an opportunity to create an indelible Batman character. Neither of us had any idea of the success that Bane would go on to enjoy. We just thought, hey, if this guy's a key Batman character for a few years and helps make the Nightfall stunt work, then we're going to be happy. No idea that he would be, seriously be the first new member of the permanent Batman Rose Gallery, literally in decades. So all that hard work and all that thought and all that passion was worth it in the end. And I couldn't have done it without Graham. Graham was the guy. Graham was the man. And of course, we've worked a lot on other things. We did a miniseries called Joe Frankenstein, which I would love to get back to, which was mostly a Graham creation, which is why his name comes first. But he, I'm very grateful that he brought me on board. I think there were elements that he wanted in the story that he thought I could bring to it. I hope I did. And I really enjoyed working on it. As I said, I'd love to get back to it someday. But we've also, worked, we worked together for like 35 years. Graham was one of my earliest collaborators back on Airboy. He started on doing Skywolf backup stories in Airboy. And of course, we had a long run in Detective and various miniseries and graphic novels and the rest. And most recently, we collaborated on The Expendables Go to Hell for Splatto Comics. And I think Graham cursed every day of that job because it was a tough script to draw. And of course, Graham's had enormous success on his own with his Monster Island series and his webcomic Sunshine State. And most recently, he's become crowdfunder king with a number of very successful horror projects. The Chenoo, which, excellent horror comic, spooky comic with a monster plaguing upstate New York during a blizzard. And his newest effort, Alien Alamo. Graham is building with Monster Island, Alien Alamo, and Chenoo, sort of building his own pocket universe and doing extraordinarily well. He's an inspiration to all of us, Mr. Nolan is, and in the way he can, in the way he's transformed his career to be a truly independent artist. He's self-funding, self-financing, self-distributing. I mean, he's just doing it all. I don't know quite how he does it, but he's become a master at it. And I couldn't be happier for him. But yeah, Graham, the fellow who asked this question, I assume you're named after Graham Nolan. So your parents must be huge fans as well. But that's why I like Graham Nolan, because he is an all-arounder, knows how to use a calendar, and, all-around good guy and awesome artist. Kenny Todd. Back in the day when CrossGen was happening, I remember thinking that signing you guys to exclusive contracts was just to make sure if I was a Chuck Dixon fan, I would buy CrossGen comics. I remember reading that it was really because they wanted books to go out on time and exclusive meant they would. I never bought that. You and Mark Waid were writing multiple titles a month or had, and they weren't late. That's my question, was because they guaranteed sales by exclusivity. I think the exclusive thing at CrossGen was mostly because Mark Alessi, who ran CrossGen, was a control freak. And, I'm not telling tales out of school. I told Mark to his face. Anybody who knew Mark for 5 minutes realized this guy was a control freak. He liked knowing that his writers and his artists were working for him and for him only, which is a good strategy in comics because you can hire someone to do your comic book and then they get another assignment and they're giving your comic book sort of, I mean, let's say you hire your best friend. Your best friend is a top comic book artist. You hire him, and he agrees to work for a lower rate, and everything looks great. But then 2 weeks into working on it, Marvel comes along and offers him a miniseries of his favorite character. Well, your book's going to be late. Let me tell you that, because he's just been offered a hotter assignment at a higher page rate, and he's a professional. He's got to feed the family. He's got to think of his career. So your little project's going to get put in the back seat, and that's just the way it happens. And Mark Alessi was smart enough to know that he did not want his staff, who were basically living in Florida, working at a facility he was paying for. He did not want any divided loyalties. He didn't want any divided attention. It just makes perfect sense. It has nothing to do with deadlines because, as you said, Mark Waid and I, perfectly capable of meeting or exceeding a deadline. As far as did he want to monopolize us for our reader base? Yeah, I think that was part of it. But mostly it was to make sure that all of us, writers and artists, were doing our best work and only working for CrossGen. Um, I got a little bit of a dispensation because I wanted to give DC Comics, who I was working for at the time, I wanted to give them, notice. So while I was working at CrossGen, I was still finishing up the last few issues of DC Comics that I committed to. I basically gave DC Comics 6 months notice, so they had plenty of time to line up another writer. I didn't want to leave them in the lurch. DC had been good to me. I'd worked there for over a decade, and also I wanted to sort of ease out of my titles on my own, in my own way, in my own fashion. So, and the thing is that exclusivity was not exclusive to CrossGen. Uh, I had, in fact, I walked away from an exclusive contract at DC to take an exclusive contract at CrossGen. Marvel and DC both offered and probably still offer today exclusive contracts. So there you go. That's everything I can tell you about exclusive contracts. Jorge Guillermo Palomera. Hey, Chuck, my question is, how was your first work with Quique Alcatena and with the other Argentinian illustrators you work with? Man, Quique Alcatena, Enrique Alcatena, Quique, as his friends call him, what an awesome talent this guy is. Like Graham Nolan, another all-rounder. Quique is at Quique is a combination of a fine arts illustrator and a cartoonist, and the best aspects of both. And he's just an awesome guy, just a super intelligent dude. He once wrote me a letter, and he said he was going to write the letter in the style of Balzac, and boy, he nailed it. This is the kind of mind that Quique has. He's I don't know much about Quique's art training. I assume it's classical because his style is so based in classical concepts of art. But he's versatile. The man is incredibly versatile, and I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I mean, we worked on everything from Alien Legion to Conan. These Conan stories that we worked on together are second only to, in as far as favorites of mine, second only to my work with Gary Kwapis. I mean, we worked on a short-lived magazine called Conan the Savage, and Tim Toohey was the editor, and he just unleashed Alcatena and I on a bunch of stories. One of them, we did a Lovecraft horror thing, and I think it's, for my money, it's the only successful Lovecraft comic imagery ever done. And it's all because of Quique. He made Lovecraft come to life on the page in a way I've never seen any artist do. I mean, the images were horrifying and disturbing. And it was all because of, he understood that these Lovecraftian monsters require scale to put them across. And that was an awesome story. But, and we did some Punisher 2099 together that, never saw the light of day. We did 2 issues of Punisher 2099 that were never published. If you go to my website, chuckdixon.net, both issues are there. You can read both issues on my website, shot from the originals. And it's a shame because this is one of my favorite characters I've ever created. He's a guy, um, he's addicted to genetically manipulating his own body. And his name is Daddy Wrong Legs. And Quique just it just made this character insane. The imagery on this character is insane and always shifting because he's constantly genetically morphing into someone else. So, hey, I'm not getting that phone. One of these days, I'm going to learn to unplug the phone before I start these these little shows. So anyway, back to Quique. Yeah, I mean, just a terrific artist to work with. And my first exposure to him was when I visited um, Buenos Aires, and I got to meet a lot of the artists, the Argentine artists. And one of the things I did was Tim Truman and I, for a little while, we had our own publishing concern called Four Winds, and we reprinted one of Alcatena's works from Buenos Aires called Subterra. And I believe we did another one. I believe we did The Moving Fortress as well. And but this was America's first exposure to Alcatena, and it wouldn't be the last because he would become quite a prolific contributor to American comics. With editors who appreciated his style, his versatility, and his ability to hit deadlines, which is astounding because of the level of detail in his work. And yet, Quique was a deadline monster. He never missed a deadline, total professional, which I just find impossible to get my head around because, as I said, his artwork is so richly detailed. But from Subterra, I sought every opportunity I could to work with him, and we worked together often, quite a few times on Batman projects. One of my favorite projects of all time, Detective Annual #7, in which Batman it's an Elseworld story, and Batman is a pirate. He's Captain Leatherwing. And I told Alcatena that I wanted a Howard Pyle kind of look, a classic golden age of illustration look to the comic. And man, oh man, oh man, did he delivered the goods. Absolutely delivered the goods. When this project was starting, Jose Garcia Lopez heard that we were doing a Batman pirate story and asked to be on it. He asked to be the artist. And I had to turn down Garcia Lopez because I wanted Quique on it. It was written for Quique with Quique in mind. We weren't doing an Errol Flynn movie. We were doing a Howard Pyle style pirate story. And so I missed an opportunity to work with Garcia Lopez, which is a bit of a disappointment, but I am not at all disappointed with the end product of the Detective Comic Annual #7. We worked on an annual of The Flash, which Quique rescued me on because the gimmick for the annuals that summer was international, globalist superheroes. And each annual was set in a different country. And they set The Flash in Argentina. And I was not the original writer on this. There was another writer on it, and that writer bailed. And I had a very short amount of time to write this annual, but I knew Quique would be the artist, so I wanted to be on it. So I got a hold of Quique and I said, look, I know nothing. I don't know enough about Argentine culture to create an ensemble cast of Argentine superheroes. I'm banking on you to do it. And he did. He created all the characters in the story, all the Argentine superheroes in the story, and of course created the imagery for them. And then gave me paragraphs describing them, their significance to Argentine culture, what their powers might be, and all the rest of it. So, I mean, I could not have written this issue in the time allotted without Quique's help on that. So, there you go. That's a pro. That's a real collaborator. And of course, we did a Predator story set in Africa in the 1920s that I had a blast with, and we got to work on Alien Legion together. And Quique had done a lot of science fiction comics for the UK market, which I didn't even know when we brought him onto Alien Legion. I just wanted to see what he would do with sci-fi. So he brought all of that experience of doing these wild and crazy science fiction digests in the UK to Alien Legion. His unique imagery and everything else. I mean, um, I'm not sure where Kike draws all of this stuff from, but and if you ever get a chance to check out his mythological work, he does a lot of mythology-based comics for Europe, and they're just mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing. So yeah, I dug working with him. I dug working with all the Argentine artists, everybody in the Villagrán studio, and Jorge Zafino, of course, and Lito Fernandez, all those guys. And I was thrilled to get to work with artists out of Buenos Aires because what I didn't know until I visited Argentina was that most of my favorite European artists were actually from Argentina. Alfonso Font and Juan Jimenez, Horatio Altuna. I mean, there is something in the water down there in Argentina that you create the most incredible comic book artists. And throughout my career, I've been lucky enough to work with you know, some major talent down there, and also helped bring them to the United States so that American comic audiences and more importantly, American comic editors would be aware of them and could hire them to do various assignments. But yeah, always a good time, always a good time. And Kike, just a gentleman, a scholar, and just one hell of an artist. Then I'm not sure. Are you missing letters on your keyboard? Okay, Chuck, how did you and Super Prumo get in touch? Super Prumo is a Brazilian publisher, and Luciano Cunho, uh, he just reached out to me in an email. He got my email somewhere and reached out to me, and he wanted to know about, basically just wanted to, get together, like two comic book guys get together. And but he wanted to know if it was possible to get his Brazilian comics, and he'd done quite a few, and he was quite successful. He still is quite successful in Brazil. If he could get some of his properties up to the United States. Well, I took a look at them, and I realized that one thing that most of them had in common was a real disdain for communism, which I have a lot of disdain for communism, which is maybe one of the reasons he contacted me. And I thought, well, most American publishers aren't going to touch this, but Vox Day will. So I forwarded Luciano's email to Vox Day, and then it was like a week-long chain of emails between the three of us about how to utilize this material in the United States. And of course, we were getting ready to do Arctoons, and this work lent itself well to Arctoons. In fact, since Arctoons has launched, A Hammer of Freedom, one of Luciano's series, is our number one. It was our number one from the very beginning. It's our most successful project on Arctoons, and growing all the time. It's gained an enormous audience. And the collaboration between Vox and myself and Super Prumo went the other way as well, as Super Prumo began publishing Alt Hero Q, a book that I write for Archaven. They started printing it down in Brazil to enormous success. There's a huge, hungry audience down there in Brazil. Apparently, Brazil is suffering through some of the same political polarization that our country is suffering through, but to an even greater degree. And there's kind of a like happened here in the United States. There's kind of an audience left behind by the major comic publishers, and Archaven and Arctoons is trying to fill that gap and please that audience up here. And Luciano and Super Prumo is doing the same thing down there. So it's only natural that we all come together to present, you know, uh, action, escapist entertainment of an alternative nature for those who have grown dissatisfied with the way comics are presented in both of our countries. Theodore Pappas. Who wears the best Hawaiian shirts, you or George Perez? As far as I can see in your videos, I think George Perez's shirts are more colorful. I will concede to George Perez in the competition of who wears the wildest, craziest Hawaiian shirts. It goes to George all the way. George has a distinct advantage, however. I buy mine off the I buy my shirts off the rack, and I have quite a few. I have shirts I've had for 20 years or more, you know, and I rotate them frequently. Basically, my entire back of my closet is nothing but Hawaiian shirts. But I'm sure that George has probably several closets full of Hawaiian shirts, and his distinct advantage is that he has them custom made. He picks out the fabric, which gives him a much wider variety of choice of shirts than I have, because I gotta pick them off the rack or find them online. And the challenge for me is finding Hawaiian shirts in tall, which is often difficult. I see these terrific Hawaiian shirts offered online, but they're not in tall, so I would look like I had stolen a child's shirt. George can have his tailored, custom made to him. That lucky guy. I've never gone that far with my Hawaiian shirt preferences, but George has, and more power to him. The problem for both of us is that we are often confused for one another at conventions because people just see the shirt and they either assume it's me or they assume it's George. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with fans, and a few minutes into it realize they think I'm George Perez. So the last few conventions I went to, I skipped the Hawaiian shirt because George was going to be there, and and put on a black polo shirt. And of course, they thought I was Alex Saviuk. You can't win. Dennis Ray, do you like writing for Zenescope? Yeah, Zenescope's a fun company. They're based out of Pennsylvania, not far from where I used to live. And Scott Beatty was, for a short while, was an editor there, and he got me interested in working for them. And at a time when I didn't have a whole lot of comic work, and they kept me busy for a while on their characters. Their characters are primarily female centric. They've had some success with the Van Helsing television show, and they brought me on to write some stuff for Van Helsing as well as their Robin Hood series. And it's fun stuff. I kind of made my bones in this business writing strong female characters. So all of their stuff is well within my wheelhouse. The books I've worked on anyway are primarily supernatural, magic based, which I'm not always comfortable with, but as long as it's mythological magic and there's a price to be paid for the people using it. But there's a lot of sci-fi and fantasy elements, a lot of horror elements, and they've given me basically free reign. I mean, as long as they approve the general plot line that I hand in, which might only be a paragraph long, I'm free to go wherever I want with the material. And of course, I'm respectful of what's come before and the characters they've established. I'm not there to break their toys. I'm there to play with their toys. So we had a good time. I remember when my first miniseries with Van Helsing, she was looking for an object called the Sword of Heaven. The Sword of Heaven. There it is. And and at the end of the miniseries, she hadn't found it. And the editors were like, "Well, she was after this object, but she never found it. She never even got to see it." And I said, "Well, that's leaving it open for a sequel. So I'll be back." And I did. I came back and told the story of her finding the Sword of Heaven. But yeah, fun company to work for. Good people, good folks. They produce consistent quality work, which is really something to be said for that these days in comics. The stuff's of a high quality. It's always well crafted, always well done, well thought out. Stories are logical, and that's that's the high bar now for American comics, and they meet or surpass it. So good times. Melody Yu, of all the heroines you could have chosen to pair with Oracle, why did you choose Black Canary? Well, I didn't choose her. Jordan B. Gorfinkel, Gorf to his friends, um, he teamed up Black Canary and Oracle and pitched it to me. They would be a team. The team didn't have a name yet. We didn't have the name Birds of Prey yet. But Gorf came up with the idea that these two would be a good match with each other. He said there were enough differences and enough similarities between two characters to create a chemistry. And it took him a while to convince me to do it. And I asked him recently, why didn't you just go with another writer? Because he was like 6 months convincing me to write the very first Birds of Prey, the one shot. And he said, because I didn't think anybody else could do it as well as you would do it, which is extraordinary amount of sign of faith. I'm very grateful to you, Gorf, for believing in me like that. But so I resisted working on it because I couldn't see it. Couldn't see what he was talking about. And finally, I relented. I wrote the first one with Gary Frank artwork, and within 6 pages of writing it, I basically wrote, the origin of the Birds of Prey, how Black Canary comes to be in the employ of Oracle. And the gimmick was that they would not meet for a long time. That Black Canary would have no idea who she was working for. It was all a matter of trust. And Black Canary was in a bad place in her life. And she needed something to do, right? Some purpose. And Oracle provided that. But the thing is, within 6 pages of the first one shot, I thought, man, Gorf was right. There is a chemistry here because Canary's always been a leap before you look kind of character, and of course Oracle has had her own traumas in the past, which created a great degree of caution in her. And of course, Black Canary's this purely physical character. Oracle's confined to a wheelchair, and the gimmick of the two of them not meeting, and Canary having, some degree of distrust for this voice, and she couldn't even trust that the voice she was hearing was the voice of her employer. It really did create a chemistry. It created like a background surface tension of suspense for the whole series. And when they finally meet, it's this terrific emotional catharsis when they finally meet in issue 18 of their monthly, which eventually we got to a monthly. We did a number of miniseries and specials, and Gorf was kind of I said he was the mother of the Birds of Prey because at every editorial meeting, he would look for places where we could insert the Birds of Prey. At one point, there was a miniseries planned and it got canceled at the last minute. And Gorf was like, well, Chuck and I could put a Birds of Prey miniseries into that publication slot without missing a beat. Of course, I had no time to write the first issue. Had to write the first issue within days to get it to an artist to stay on the schedule of the original miniseries. But that's the kind of stuff that Gorf did, to keep the whole thing going. And, to try to put Birds of Prey into the minds of the readers. And of course, the series is very successful, ran for a very, very long time. With me writing and others writing, and of course spawned movies, television show, and probably buy Birds of Prey pajamas and lunchboxes. I don't know. But it all goes back to Gorf because it was his idea. He had faith in the project and had faith in me, and together it happened. And the readers responded. I think they responded to these characters. I'm also very proud that we were able to do a book that was female centric, but they kept their clothes on. It was not a cheesecake book, and they were, the readers dug it. Like I said earlier, I made my bones writing strong female characters. This was in my wheelhouse. This is a good book to put me on. As far as Canary's Cry goes, she had lost that, I believe, during Mike Grell's run because of something traumatic that happened to her. Some grievous bodily injuries, and she lost her Canary Cry. And then I ultimately brought it back. Editorially, we discussed it quite a bit. Canary would eventually get her cry back, but I wanted to make sure it was at a time that made logical sense within the story, dramatic sense, and the rest. So when we restored her Canary Cry, it was very much a part of the story, not just, hey, her cry's back, or she wakes up one morning and it's back. Everything in comics is about story. You never want to miss an opportunity to dramatize something and have it be the basis for, a ripping yarn. So you kind of save those things for the right moment, just as we saved Oracle and Canary meeting for the right moment to get the maximum impact for the readers out of it. Hey, what happened there? Uh, Arkhaven, Arctoons. It's growing by leaps and bounds. I mentioned the Super Prumo. It's got tens of thousands of readers for Hammer of Freedom, and we got tens of thousands of readers on a lot of our other series. Why don't you join us? Come over to Arkhaven, Arctoons. It's a free digital website. And if you want to support my work there, you can directly support my work there on the series Something Big and Go Monster Go. You can go to Patreon. Look for Arkhaven at Patreon, and it's $1, $3, $5, whatever, and you can help me. It's the Chuck Dixon Slush Fund. Help me pay the artists so I can keep creating brand new series for Arctoons, and I would really appreciate it. So anyway, that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And I'll see everybody down the road.